Hey, Josh here. So America's trust in mainstream media, according to Gallup.com, has been declining for decades, to the point where individual content creators, like Joe Rogan for example, can have more viewers than multiple media outlets combined. But why is this? Why aren't they trusted like they once were? Well, the best place to start is to find out who funds them. Out of countless shareholders owning shares in media outlets, two names appear more often and have higher shares than others. Those are the Vanguard Group and BlackRock Fund Advisors. If you add State Street, which is the third highest in shares, the three of them are also known as the Big Three. Here are some of the shares that the first two have: CNN, ABC News, NBC News, CBS News, MSNBC, Sinclair Local Television News, Gray Television, CBS, 60 Minutes, Graham Media Group, Canetco Inc., New York Times, Slate, 538, and Foreign Policy. More information can be found on finance.yahoo.com, or you can go to this website, which lists the index of mainstream media ownership in 2021 in the US and Canada.
You follow drugs, you get drug addicts and drug dealers. But you start to follow the money, and you don't know where the it's going to take you.
I found a fact check by Reuters, where they fact checked a video that claimed Vanguard and BlackRock own all the largest corporations in the world. Here's what they said. While it is true that both investment firms hold significant shares in many of the world's leading companies and can therefore wield voting rights, shares are ultimately owned by the BlackRock and Vanguard's clients. They went on to say that a spokesperson for both firms told Reuters that while they do appear to own significant shares in the world's biggest businesses, those shares are purchased using money belonging to their clients, and therefore the shareholders are ultimately their clients. However, it doesn't mention who these clients are, and their relations with Vanguard and BlackRock, specifically whether these clients are multinational corporations or individuals working with or for Vanguard and BlackRock, or are they independent from the two, with the client's only connection being that Vanguard and BlackRock are used to make the investments. If you know more information about these clients, please put in the comments. I'd appreciate that. Here's the problem. Because the mainstream media can be manipulated or swayed to promote anything if paid enough money, it creates doubt in the honesty and reliability, and we saw this a few years ago with Pfizer.
Good Morning America is brought to you by Pfizer.
CBS Health Watch sponsored by Pfizer.
Anderson Cooper 360. Brought to you by Pfizer.
ABC News Nightline. Brought to you by Pfizer.
Making a difference. Brought to you by Pfizer.
CNN Tonight. Brought to you by Pfizer. Early Start. Brought to you by Pfizer. Friday night on Aaron Burnett Out Front. Brought to you by Pfizer.
This Week with George Stephanopoulos is brought to you by Pfizer.
This Weather Report brought to you by Pfizer.
Today's countdown to the royal wedding is brought to you by Pfizer.
And now a CBS Sports Update brought to you by Pfizer.
Meet the Press data download brought to you by Pfizer.
This portion of CBS This Morning sponsored by Pfizer.
On how to find the hidden sugars in the American family diet. Sponsored by Pfizer.
With the billions of dollars Pfizer spends yearly on media outlets, is the media going to be honest, unbiased, and objective when promoting the vaccines? This, however, is a conflict of interest. As stated by Investopedia, occurs when an entity or individual becomes unreliable because of personal or self-serving interests and professional duties or responsibilities. Such a conflict occurs when a company or a person has a vested interest, such as money, status, knowledge, relationships, or reputation, which puts into question whether their actions, judgment, or decision-making can be unbiased. Because of this, people are questioning whether the mainstream media has been promoting the Pfizer vaccines as safe and effective because it's legitimately safe and effective, or whether they're just saying that because they don't want to lose their funding. It's like YouTubers promoting mobile games, for example. Do they actually enjoy and regularly play the game, or are they just promoting it because money?
Hello, I like money.
A question to ask is, will the media properly investigate pharmaceutical companies? If we were to say hypothetically that the COVID-19 vaccine was undeniably proven to cause more harm than good, would they report on it, downplay it, or ignore it? Another issue of different media outlets owned by the same asset management firms is that you can get different outlets reading the exact same script.
Hi, I'm Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But we are concerned about the trouble and trend of irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and
False news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these things they simply aren't true without checking facts first. Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
That whole clip is both hilarious and scary with how ironic these outlets were. It just shows that we should be more concerned about the troubling trend of irresponsible one-sided news stories plaguing our country. Wait.
Sponsored by Pfizer.
But if you think this hasn't happened before or it's a one-off coincidence, then check again. We saw this with Donald Trump before he became president in 2016, with these articles similarly talking bad about Trump. This next clip shows real unedited clips from mainstream media containing 11 different scenarios compiled into one segment by The Conan O'Brien Show.
If your email inbox is out of control and you've given up sorting it out, a Baltimore company thinks it has a solution for you. Could this be the end of email overload?
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 Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload?
Could this be the end of email overload?
Well, if you filled up your gas tank lately, then you don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise. You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise. You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise. You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise. You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise. You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise. You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise. You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise. You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise. You don't need us to tell you gas prices are on the rise.
Yeah, that sounds bad.
And to top it off, here's a clip from MSNBC when they were also talking about Trump.
Well, and I think that the dangerous, edges here are that he's trying to undermine the media, trying to make up his own facts. And it could be that while unemployment and the economy worsens, he could have undermined the messaging so much that he can actually control exactly what people think. And that is our job.
What did you just say?
That is our job.
Does she think people are so dumb and hopeless to think for themselves that they must be told what to think? Hold on, if she's reading a teleprompter written by someone else, then she's not thinking for herself either and is being told what to say.
Prime Minister of Sweden visited Washington today, and my tiny little nipples went to France.
During the Disinformation and the Erosion of Democracy event, which took place from the 6th to the 8th of April 2022, Chris Phillips, a college freshman, asked Brian Stelter this.
My question is for Mr. Stelter. You've all spoken extensively about Fox News being a purveyor of disinformation. But CNN is right up there with them. They pushed the Russian collusion hoax. They pushed the Jussie Smollett hoax. They smeared Justice Kavanaugh as a rapist, and they also smeared Nick Sandmann as a white supremacist. And yes, they dismissed the Hunter Biden laptop affair as pure Russian disinformation. With mainstream corporate journalists becoming little more than apologists and cheerleaders for the regime, is it time to finally declare that the canon of journalistic ethics is dead or no longer operative? All the mistakes of the mainstream media, and CNN in particular, seem to magically all go in one direction. Are we expected to believe that this is all just some sort of random coincidence, or is there something else behind it?
It's too bad. It's time for lunch.
You have 30 seconds.
No, I mean,
right?
there's a clock that says 30 seconds. But I think my honest answer to you, and I'll come over and talk in more detail after this, is that I think you're describing a different channel than the one that I watch. But I understand that that is a popular right-wing narrative about CNN. I think it's important, when we talk about shared reality and democracy, all these networks, all these news outlets have to defend democracy. And when they screw up, admit it.
Now the full response is in the description. But for this video, I want to concentrate on the part where Brian Stelter claimed that the accusations of CNN's disinformation are just a right-wing narrative. The hoaxes and lies that Phillips just mentioned were spread by CNN. One example is when Hunter Biden's laptop emails were disregarded as Russian disinformation. Guess who promoted that lie?
Biden's secret email. The Post claimed that the emails were found on a laptop computer that was brought to a repair shop in Delaware in the spring of 2019.
Described by many intelligence experts as having hallmarks, all the hallmarks of a Russian disinformation.
Russian disinformation. This is a classic example of the right-wing media machine.
Even after the laptop was confirmed to be true, this happened. CNN's Brian Stelter refuses to walk back his false claims Hunter Biden's laptop emails were Russian disinformation. Philip Slater on Twitter replied and said, "Thank you at Brian Stelter for taking my question and having a conversation with me afterwards, but I am still wondering, if CNN is truly unbiased, why is every mistake they make an overstep of favor of Democrats and against Republicans? This is also true. Have a look at some of these examples out of many from CNN. Fiery but mostly peaceful protests, Clinton violated the law, an election hack. If you look at some of these more closely, they become even worse when you see the dates of these paired articles were not published not long after each other. It just makes them look bad because they didn't do their due diligence, intentionally or not. This doesn't happen only with CNN, but with other mainstream media outlets like the Washington Post, the Huffington Post, Slate, and so on. Check out this website if you want to see many more examples. However, it doesn't include right-wing media outlets. I've tried to find similar images clearly showing the fake news, but I personally couldn't find any. So I found this article detailing right-wing news stories that ended up being fake news. The New York Times published a cover story claiming that copies of Vice President Kamala Harris's 2019 children's book, Superheroes Are Everywhere, were being gifted to migrant children at a Department of Health and Human Services shelter in Long Beach, California. The Post provided no evidence for the claim aside from a single Reuters photograph of Harris's book propped up against a backpack on the table. The story was picked up by a host of right-wing media outlets, including Fox News, which co-authored a follow-up story with Laura Italiano, the Post reporter who wrote the original piece. The Washington Post fact-checker reported that the Post based its entire story on a photograph of one copy of the book donated to the shelter by a community member. The Post deleted its two stories on the matter and later republished them with the corrections and editor's notes added. The second example of right-wing fake news is when Fox News ran multiple segments claiming that President Joe Biden's administration would require Americans to radically reduce their red meat consumption under Biden's climate policy. Fox's on-air discussions relied on the Daily Mail story that reported on Biden's administration could require Americans to cut their red meat consumption by 90%, citing academic studies showing that the reductions in animal products help cut greenhouse gas emissions. In reality, Biden has no plans to require Americans to eat less red meat. Fox host John Roberts acknowledged in a brief on-air correction that the claims were wrong.
On Friday, we told you about a study from the University of Michigan to give some perspective on President Biden's ambitious climate change goals. That research from 2020 found that cutting back how much red meat people eat would have a drastic impact on harmful greenhouse gas emissions. The data was accurate, but a graphic and a script incorrectly implied that it was part of Biden's plan for dealing with climate change. That is not the case.
By the way, if this video is being helpful to you, consider pressing the like button. Therefore, it can spread and help more people. Thank you. Which do you think is better? Having the media tell you what you want to hear, or telling you what you need to hear, no matter how good or bad it is? Well, as you may know, for a few months after Elon Musk bought Twitter, the Twitter files have slowly been released for the public to see what went on behind the scenes at Twitter before Elon Musk took over. Coincidentally enough, the first time I was planning to record this video, another Twitter files was released by Matt Taibbi about Hamilton 68. I will briefly summarize the tweets related to mainstream media, so the link to the tweets is in the description. In 2017, Hamilton 68 was a digital dashboard that claimed to track Russian influence and was the source of hundreds if not thousands of mainstream media print and TV news stories in the Trump years. News outlets for years cited what's in Hamilton 68 when claiming Russian bots were amplifying an endless parade of social media causes against strikes in Syria in support of Fox host Laura Ingraham, the campaigns of both Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. Hamilton 68 was the source of stories claiming Russian bots pushed terms like deep state or hashtags like Fire McMaster, Schumer shutdown, walk away, release the memo, Alabama Senate race, and Parkland shooting, among many others. The secret ingredient to Hamilton 68's analytical method? A list. Our analysis has linked 600 Twitter accounts to Russian influence activities online, was how the site put at launch. Hamilton 68 never released the list, claiming the Russians will simply shut the accounts down. Twitter executives were in a unique position to recreate Hamilton's list, reverse engineering it from the site's requests for Twitter data. These accounts, they concluded, are neither strongly Russian nor strongly bots, no evidence to support the statement that the dashboard is a finger on the pulse of Russian information ops, hardly illuminating a massive influence operation. The Hamilton 68 barely had any Russians. In fact, apart from a few RT accounts, it's mostly full of ordinary Americans, Canadians, and British. It was a scam. Instead of tracking how Russia influenced American attitudes, Hamilton 68 simply collected a handful of mostly real, mostly American accounts and described their organic conversations as Russian scheming. Some Twitter execs badly wanted to expose Hamilton 68, but there were internal concerns about taking on the politically connected Alliance for Securing Democracy. However, they worked extensively with reporters to explain the flaws in Hamilton 68's methodology and tried to press them to encourage Hamilton 68 to be more transparent on their methodology. What makes this an important story is the sheer scale of the news footprint left by Hamilton 68's digital McCarthyism. Hamilton 68 was used as a source to assert Russian influence in an astonishing array of news stories: support for Brett Kavanaugh, or the Devin Nunes memo, the Parkland shooting, manipulation of black voters, attacks on the Mueller investigation. These stories raised fears in the population, and most insidious of all, were used to smear people like Tulsi Gabbard as foreign assets and drum up sympathy for political causes like Joe Biden's campaign by describing critics as Russian-aligned. Incredibly and ironically, these stories were also frequently used as evidence of the spread of fake news on sites like Twitter. Now, CNN, yep, we're talking about CNN again, hasn't been reporting on the Twitter files just like many other news organizations. At the time of making this video, there have been 15 different Twitter files released, with CNN only publishing 5 articles on the topic. CNN did an article on the reasoning for this, titled "Why News Organizations Are Largely Skeptical of Elon Musk's Twitter Files Theater." In that, they say the reason for this is because the releases have not largely contained any revelatory information. So far, the files have failed to do much outside highlight exactly how messy content moderation can be. That was the case when the 5th installment of the Twitter files was released, revealing some of the behind-the-scenes debate that preceded Donald Trump's ban. The other reason was that Musk refuses to open up the Twitter files to the press at large. Instead of providing multiple news outlets with access to the documents and Twitter personnel, he has instead opted to exclusively share them with writers of his own choice. In other words, Musk has relied on a set of hand-picked gatekeeping writers to cover the story, while keeping the raw materials and context locked away from the rest of the news media and broader public. Will they report on the Hamilton 68 Twitter file? Because it includes emails from Twitter execs confirming that Hamilton 68 was a scam all along. It could also be considered revelatory to CNN, as they did cite Hamilton 68 for their articles. For example, Russian bots promote pro-gun messages after Florida school shooting, and Russian bots are using #walkaway to try to wound Dems in the midterms. What's even more interesting is while CNN's second reason for not reporting on the Twitter files is because Musk refuses to allow multiple news outlets to have access to the documents and Twitter personnel, CNN admits in their first article that with Hamilton 68, the group does not disclose which accounts it tracks, and CNN has not independently verified its findings. As Chris Phillips said, CNN's mistakes tend to favor Democrats more so than Republicans. Do you think this is just another example of bias in CNN's reporting? Should CNN publicly correct their mistakes?
All these networks, all these news outlets have to defend democracy. And when they screw up, admit it.
Short answer, yes.
After all of that information, one question you might have is, how do I distinguish between fake news and legitimate news? Well, with the aid of this article, here are 6 steps to help you out. Number 1, develop a critical mindset. One of the main reasons fake news is such a big issue is it is often easily believable, so it's easy to get tricked. A lot of fake news is also written to create shock value, that is, a strong instinctive reaction such as fear or anger. Oh my god. It's essential that you keep your emotional response in check. Instead, approach what you see and hear rationally and critically.
Our job tonight actually is to scare people to death on this subject.
Some questions to ask yourself while watching mainstream media are, why has this story been written? Is it to persuade me of a certain viewpoint? Is it selling me a particular product? Is it trying to get me to click through to another website? Or am I being triggered? Number 2, check the source. Check the web address for the page you're reading. Spelling errors in company names or strange extensions like these may mean that the source is suspicious. Consider the reputation and professional experience of an author or publisher, even if you're familiar with them, to check if they're known for their expertise or exaggerating topics. Number 3 is a bit of an interesting one, as it suggests that you check if other media outlets are reporting on the story. As I've mentioned before, the stories can be the same on multiple outlets because many of them are funded by the same group. And just because a story is on one or more sources doesn't mean that it's factually accurate. However, a good point that they do say is that concluding that all mainstream media outputs are fake is just as bad as believing every rumor or conspiracy theory as true. And something funny is that the article said that CNN is a professional global news agency that have rigorous editorial guidelines and extensive networks of highly trained reporters. Yeah, we've gone through that. Number 4, check the facts. Credible news stories will include plenty of facts, such as quotes from experts, survey data, official statistics, etc. If the facts aren't included or are minimal, it's possible that either the facts go against what's being said, or the facts have been deliberately chosen to back up a particular narrative. So questioning it is absolutely necessary.
That's what it said on the news. And the news never lies.
Number 5, check the images are authentic. Modern editing software has made it easy for people to create fake images that look real. Research shows that only half of us can tell when images are fake. When checking an image, things to be wary of are strange shadows, jagged edges, warping where lines that should be straight in the background are wavy, etc. Images can also be 100% accurate and unedited, but can either be in the wrong context or taken out of context. Their example is a photo of litter covering a beach. Could be from a different beach or from 10 years ago, not the recent alleged event. Google's reverse image search can check an image's origins and see if it's been altered. Another tip I've seen is to use a fact-checking site like Snopes, PolitiFact, etc. This would be a good idea if all fact-checking sites properly checked information, and I've already done a video on that, so check it out after this one. Something to keep in mind is to be cautious of not accidentally getting stuck in an echo chamber. This is where someone only interacts with information or opinions that reflect and reinforce their own. It can create misinformation and distorts a person's perspective, making it difficult to discuss controversial topics and to even listen or consider opposing viewpoints. More on this can be found on gcfglobal.org. If you seek factually accurate stories, research, etc., but disagree with it, that does not simply make it fake news. If you're unsure of something you've seen somewhere, question it and don't believe in it 100%. Instead, look at both sides of the story to figure out the truth. However, doing the opposite, and some people might think of the word sheeple, which is a mix of two words, sheep and people. This term is used for people who mindlessly accept as fact anything they are told without question or research of their own, especially if heard from politicians, religious leaders, or mass media. This term was used in the Matrix 4 movie right at the end, when the analyst, that's what he's called, was talking to Neo and Trinity about the people still asleep in the Matrix. He said,
"The sheeple aren't going anywhere. They like my world. They don't want this sentimentality. They don't want freedom or empowerment. They want to be controlled. They crave the comfort of certainty."
It's an interesting line to have, not only because it summed up the people stuck in the Matrix, but also because the Matrix movies were basically about waking up to the truth and being free by taking the red pill instead of taking the blue pill and continuing to live a life full of lies.
Free your mind.
The Fact Checkers video that I previously mentioned is in the description. This video discusses what the best unbiased search engines to use are, and if you've watched both of them, YouTube recommends this one. I'll see you next time.